You open your eyes. You're on the couch in your living room. Afternoon light filters through the half-closed blinds. Your phone vibrates for the 5th time in 10 minutes. It's your friend asking for a favor, again. You already know what you'll do. You'll say yes, even if inside you're screaming no. Even if you've already said yes 3 times this week. Even if each time you swear to yourself that next time will be different. Welcome to the theater of the absurd you call life, where you are simultaneously the leading actor and the bored spectator, where your happiness depends on the applause of others, where you've transformed your existence into a 24/7 customer service desk, holidays included. Carl Jung called it betrayal of the self. You call it being a good person. But let's be clear about one thing. Pleasing others has nothing to do with kindness. It's psychological terrorism you practice against yourself, with a smile plastered on your face. Think about the last time you said yes when your body was screaming no. Do you remember that feeling? Your stomach twisting like a raging snake, your jaw clenching, your shoulders slumping until they turn to stone. Your body knows perfectly well when you're lying. It's your brain constantly telling itself fairy tales. If you've just realized you're not helping anyone, you're just betraying yourself, leave a like now. That way, I'll know you've stopped lying. You tell yourself you're helping someone, that you're mature, available, valuable. Jung would tell you you're a prisoner of what he called the persona, a mask so perfect you've forgotten you're wearing it. Now it's your face, or at least you think it's your face. But here's the interesting part. The moment you stop people-pleasing, you don't become selfish, you become real. And that transformation begins when you understand why you started behaving this way. The answer will shock you. It has nothing to do with being kind. It's everything to do with childhood survival. Jung spent decades studying why people abandon themselves to please others. He discovered something that completely changed the game. People-pleasing isn't a character flaw. It's not even a personality trait. It's survival programming, psychological conditioning that begins in childhood when your true self is first rejected. You were 6, maybe 7. You expressed a genuine need. Maybe you were angry. Maybe you said no to something. Maybe you simply showed genuine emotions that were uncomfortable for the adults around you. And what happened? Rejection, disapproval, that cold feeling of not being enough, of being too much, of being wrong. So you've learned the crucial lesson. Being yourself means being rejected. Being needy means being selfish. Expressing anger means being mean. You did what all intelligent children do. You adapted. You created a mask designed to avoid conflict, rejection, and abandonment. You smiled when you wanted to cry. You said yes when you meant no. You became what others needed you to be. An emotional chameleon, a psychological contortionist, a specialist in self-effacement. Jung understood that this mask serves a survival function. But he also discovered its dark cost. When you identify with your mask, you lose touch with your true self. You become what we might call the empty helper, someone everyone loves but no one truly knows. The most devastating part? Jung discovered that chronically pleasing people doesn't create the love and connection it promises. It creates the opposite. Relationships based on utility rather than authenticity, where you're valued for what you do, not who you are. You've become a human appliance, functional, reliable, always available. But no one falls in love with a blender, no matter how efficient. People don't form deep bonds with emotional support vending machines, even if they dispense free candy. But there's something even more disturbing that Jung discovered about why people-pleasing becomes so irresistible: the cycle of dependence. Jung made a shocking discovery. people-pleasing works like a psychological addiction. You get a temporary high from approval, but it never lasts, so you need increasing amounts of validation to feel worthy. This creates what I would call the cycle of approval dependence.
This is how Jung saw this cycle destroying people's true selves. First comes the trigger. Someone needs something from you. They ask for help. They show disapproval. Your nervous system activates the old survival program. If I don't please them, they'll reject me. Then comes the fix. You say yes. You help. You sacrifice your own needs. You get a brief burst of relief, security, connection. But Jung observed that this relief is temporary because it's based on performance, not authentic connection. Then comes the crash. You feel resentful, exhausted, invisible. You realize once again that you've abandoned yourself. But instead of examining this pattern, you blame yourself for being too sensitive, for being selfish, for feeling bad about helping others. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The unconscious pattern that drives people-pleasing is the belief that your true self is fundamentally unlovable. Therefore, you must earn love through service, conformity, and self-sacrifice. But here's where Jung's insight becomes revolutionary. He discovered that this pattern isn't just bad for you, it also prevents true intimacy. When you relate to others through your mask, rather than your true self, you create what I would call pseudo-intimacy. Relationships that seem close but lack true understanding. Think about your closest relationships. Do people know your boundaries, your aversions, your authentic reactions? Or do they know a curated version that's always understanding, always available, always accommodating? If it's the latter, Jung would say, you're not in a relationship at all. You're in a performance. Your partner knows your opinion on 200 different restaurants because you always say, whatever you like. Your friends know you're available whenever they need something. But no one knows what really makes you angry, what scares you, what you deeply desire. The most tragic part is that people-pleasers often attract what Jung called unconscious narcissists. These individuals need someone to manage their emotions, shoulder their responsibilities, and never question their behavior. This creates a psychological symbiosis that seems like love, but is actually mutual exploitation. You provide free emotional regulation. They provide the bare minimum of attention needed to keep you hooked. It's a business deal disguised as a relationship, and you're in it up to your neck. The cost of the shadow. Jung's deepest insight into people-pleasing concerns what he called the shadow. All the parts of yourself you've rejected to maintain your accommodating image. But here's what most people don't understand. When you repress your authentic reactions, they don't disappear. They grow stronger underground. Jung wrote, "We can't change anything until we accept it. Condemnation doesn't liberate, it oppresses." People-pleasers expend enormous energy condemning and suppressing their own needs, boundaries, and authentic responses. But this creates what I would call shadow rebellion, when your repressed self begins to sabotage your mask from within. It manifests as passive aggression. You agree to help, but do so reluctantly. You smile while sending subtle signals of resentment. You become what Jung would call split. Your mask says yes, while your shadow says no. Internal war. It manifests as chronic exhaustion. Jung understood that maintaining a false self requires enormous psychological energy. When you constantly monitor your reactions, manage the emotions of others, and suppress your authentic responses, you become exhausted at the cellular level. You wake up already tired. You go to bed exhausted. The weekend is just about regaining enough energy to survive the next week. You're like a phone with a faulty battery, always charging, never fully charged. It manifests as mysterious illnesses. Jung was one of the first psychologists to recognize that psychological repression manifests as physical symptoms. People pleasers often suffer from headaches, digestive problems, autoimmune diseases, and chronic pain that have no clear medical cause. Your body is screaming what your mouth can't say. I'm collapsing under the weight of all these needs that aren't mine. I'm drowning in everyone's requests. I need help, but I don't know how to ask for it because I'm the one helping.
Most devastatingly, it manifests as what I would call identity erosion. You become so adept at reading other people's needs and adapting to their expectations that you lose touch with your own authentic preferences, desires, and reactions. You become a shapeshifter without a true form. Someone asks you what you want to eat. Panic! You don't know. You've spent so much time asking others what they want that you've forgotten how to access your own desires. What's your favorite movie? Depends on who asks. Your favorite color? Whatever you like. Jung observed that this split creates a dangerous psychological dynamic. The more you suppress your true self, the more it seeks expression through unconscious means. You may have explosive episodes of anger that surprise everyone, including yourself. You may make sudden, abrupt decisions that seem completely out of character. It's your shadow trying to restore your psychological balance, but because you don't recognize these outbursts as legitimate parts of yourself, you feel ashamed and double down on people-pleasing behavior. This creates an even more destructive cycle. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For the people-pleaser, making the darkness conscious means acknowledging the anger, resentment, and needs you've hidden. Not to become cruel, but to become whole. The question becomes, how do you integrate your shadow without destroying your relationships or becoming the very thing you've been avoiding? The solution is individuation. Jung's solution to chronic people-pleasing wasn't therapy or self-help techniques. It was what he called individuation, the psychological process of becoming who you truly are beneath your conditioned responses. But Jung understood that for people-pleasers, this process feels like death because your entire identity has been built on being needed by others. Your entire psychological structure is based on the fantasy that if you stop being useful, you will stop being loved. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept yourself completely." For people-pleasers, self-acceptance means accepting parts of yourself that you've been taught are bad: your anger, your needs, your boundaries, your capacity to disappoint others. This is where Jung's understanding becomes revolutionary. He realized that what people-pleasers call selfish is actually self-respect. What they call bad is actually honest. What they call difficult is actually authentic. Fear isn't about becoming a bad person. It's about discovering that you were never as bad as you thought, that your needs are legitimate, that your boundaries are healthy, that your anger is valuable information about what's wrong with your life. The process of individuation for people-pleasers involves what I would call shadow integration, consciously reclaiming the parts of yourself you've denied. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive or cruel. It means becoming whole. Step 1. Acknowledge your authentic reactions without immediately suppressing them. When someone asks you something, notice your body's response before your mind jumps into people-pleasing mode. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your heart." Your heart's first response before conditioning kicks in is usually your authentic truth. That tightness in your stomach when your coworker asks you to cover for him again, that's a no. That heaviness in your chest when your friend wants you to do something you don't want to do, that's a no.
Step 2. Learn to deal with others' disapproval
without immediately trying to fix it. Jung understood that people pleasers are terrified of negative emotions, both their own and those of others. Therefore, they become emotional managers, constantly monitoring and regulating everyone's feelings. But this impedes authentic relationships because it deprives others of their right to feel their own emotions. When your partner is disappointed by your decision and you resist the urge to immediately retract, you're allowing them to process their feelings, to grow, to learn that disappointment isn't fatal. Step 3 involves what Jung called the collision with the unconscious, the moment when your old patterns no longer work and you're forced to find new ways of relating. For people pleasers, this often comes as a crisis, burnout, illness, a relationship that finally demands authenticity. It's when you find yourself in the car after saying yes again, and something inside you breaks. Just like it physically breaks, you feel the snap. And suddenly, you can't do it anymore. You can't smile and nod anymore. You can't bend and twist and adapt yourself anymore. But Jung saw these crises as opportunities for rebirth. When your mask can no longer be maintained, the space opens for your true self to emerge. This process isn't comfortable, but it's necessary for psychological health. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Pain is not punishment. It is the pangs of childbirth. Something real is trying to be born through your crisis. And that something is your true self, naked, frightened, but finally real." The key is to learn to trust this process rather than immediately reverting to people-pleasing behaviors when others resist your authenticity. And they will resist. Oh, they will. The resistance phase. Jung observed that when people-pleasers begin individuation, they encounter fierce resistance, not only from others, but from their own psychological conditioning. What I would call the resistance phase is when your new authenticity threatens the unconscious contracts that have governed your relationships for years. People will say, "You've changed." And they're right. You've changed. You've stopped being who they needed you to be and started being who you actually are. Jung understood that this threatens the people who benefited from your self-abandonment. Your mother telling you you've become selfish because you can't visit her every weekend. Your friend stopping calling you when you realize every conversation is about his problems. Your coworker becoming cold when you stop doing his job as well as yours. But here's where Jung's insight becomes crucial. Their resistance isn't about you becoming worse. It's about them losing access to your unconscious conformity. Jung wrote, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power. And where the will to power predominates, love is lacking." The people who most strongly resist your authenticity are often those whose relationships with you were based on power rather than love. They loved your usefulness, not your essence. Your boundaries force them to confront this uncomfortable truth. During this phase, you'll face what I'd call psychological guilt warfare. Intense psychological pressure designed to pull you back into people-pleasing patterns. You'll hear phrases like, "You were so understanding before," or "I don't know what happened to you," or "You're becoming selfish." Jung would recognize these as projections. When someone calls you selfish for setting boundaries, they're revealing their inability to respect the autonomy of others. When they say you've become cold for expressing your needs, they're showing their discomfort with authentic relationships. The resistance phase tests your commitment to individuation.
Will you revert to familiar patterns of people-pleasing to restore peace? Or will you remain steadfast in your authenticity, despite others' discomfort?
Jung wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. Your tribe, family, friends, colleagues, have a psychological investment in your people-pleasing patterns. Your authenticity disrupts their unconscious expectations." But Jung also observed that those who overcome this stage of resistance emerge stronger and more integrated. You develop what I would call authentic trust, peace in being misunderstood rather than desperation to be appreciated. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive or dismissive of others' needs. It means responding to others out of choice rather than compulsion, from wholeness rather than hurt, from strength rather than fear. Some relationships won't survive your individuation, and Jung would say this is necessary and healthy. Relationships built on your self-abandonment were never real relationships. They were psychological arrangements that served the unconscious needs of others while emptying your essential self. But something beautiful emerges from this difficult phase. Space for authentic connections based on mutual respect rather than unconscious exploitation. People who choose you for who you are, not what you do. Relationships where you can be tired, irritable, imperfect, and still be loved. The mastery of integration. Jung believed that successful individuation leads to what he called the union of opposites, the integration of seemingly contradictory aspects of yourself. For those who have recovered from people-pleasing, this means becoming both kind and with clear boundaries, both caring and self-protective, both generous and selective. This integration creates what I would call conscious compassion, the ability to care for others without abandoning yourself. Jung wrote, "What fits one person is bad for another. There is no one-size-fits-all recipe for living." You learn to offer what's needed for both yourself and others, rather than automatically sacrificing yourself. You can help your friend move if you have the energy and genuine desire, but not when you're exhausted and have already helped him 5 times while he's never reciprocated. The integrated person develops what Jung called an ethical relationship with the unconscious. You become aware of your people-pleasing triggers and can choose conscious responses rather than falling into automatic patterns. When someone asks you something, pause and consult with your true self before responding. This pause is revolutionary for people-pleasers. In that space between trigger and response, you access choice. You might consider, is this request aligned with my values? Do I have the energy to fulfill it authentically? Am I being asked because of my competence or my conformity? Am I the only person who can do it? Or am I just the only one who never says no? Jung understood that this awareness doesn't make you cruel or selfish. It makes you real. You begin to help others from abundance rather than depletion, from genuine desire rather than unconscious compulsion. Your relationships become healthier because they're based on authentic exchange rather than one-sided giving. The mastery stage involves what I would call boundary art, the ability to set limits gracefully rather than aggressively. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When someone's request irritates you, instead of immediately saying yes, you explore what this reaction reveals about your authentic needs. You learn to say, "I need to think about it," instead of reflexively accepting. You practice "no, but I can offer this instead," rather than total self-abandonment or outright rejection. You develop the ability to disappoint people without feeling like you've committed a crime. This is perhaps the most profound transformation. You stop associating other people's discomfort with your own moral failure.
Above all, you learn to tolerate others' emotional responses to your boundaries without immediately trying to fix them. Jung understood that emotional management is a form of control disguised as care. When you allow others to have their feelings without taking responsibility for them, you offer them the gift of emotional autonomy. This creates space for true intimacy because people can present themselves authentically rather than putting on an act for your emotional management. They learn to process their reactions, to develop their own coping strategies, to relate to you as an equal rather than a service provider. The integrated X-compliant person becomes what Jung envisioned, someone who can engage in authentic relationships while maintaining their essential self. You love others without losing yourself, you care without exhausting yourself, you help without fostering dependency. This is the opposite of selfishness. It's what Jung called enlightened self-responsibility. You take responsibility for your needs, emotions, and authenticity. This frees others to do the same. And this is true love. The kind that doesn't ask anyone to disappear so the other can exist. The new relational pattern. Jung observed that when someone completes the individuation process, their relational patterns completely transform. What I would call a shift in attraction occurs. You stop attracting people who need management and start attracting people who value authenticity. This happens because your energetic signature changes. Instead of radiating, "I can fix you," or "I will carry your emotions," you radiate, "I am available for authentic, mutual connections." Jung understood that we attract what corresponds to our level of psychological development. The people attracted to your new authenticity have done their own psychological work. They don't need you to manage their emotions, shoulder their responsibilities, or sacrifice yourself for their comfort. They're attracted to your authenticity rather than your usefulness. But Jung also warned of what I would call transitional loneliness, the period between losing relationships based on people-pleasing and attracting relationships based on authenticity. This phase can feel isolating because you're no longer willing to settle for pseudo-intimacy, but genuine connections take time to develop. Jung wrote, "Loneliness comes not from having no one around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." The integrated person experiences a different kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being unknown, but the temporary loneliness of waiting for others who can appreciate being known. This waiting period is actually healing. You learn to enjoy your own company without needing constant validation from others. You develop what Jung called a relationship with the self, an internal sense of wholeness that doesn't depend on external approval. When authentic connections emerge, they look completely different from your old relationships. There's mutual respect for boundaries, emotional honesty without drama, the ability to disagree without anyone becoming the bad guy, support that flows both ways, not just one way. Jung believed these relationships represented human potential, connections based on conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion, mutual growth rather than mutual exploitation, love rather than need.
The most beautiful aspect of this transformation is that you become capable of the very thing you were seeking through people-pleasing, authentic love. But now, you receive it for who you are, rather than despite who you are. Your true self, including your boundaries, your needs, your sometimes difficult truths, becomes lovable because you have learned to love it yourself. Jung understood that self-love is not narcissism. It is the foundation of all authentic relationships. You can finally offer others what you've always wanted to offer, genuine care that comes from wholeness, rather than compulsive helping that arises from hurt. And people feel it. They sense the difference between someone who helps because they can't say no and someone who helps because they choose to say yes. The ripple effect. Jung believed that individual transformation creates collective transformation. When you stop people-pleasing and embrace authenticity, you don't just change your life, you give others permission to do the same. What I would call a wave of authenticity spreads outward from your transformed relationships. People in your life witness someone who says no gracefully, who sets boundaries without aggression, who cares without self-sacrifice. This challenges their unconscious assumptions about how relationships should work. Some will resist this challenge, but others will be inspired by your example. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Your authenticity catalyzes transformation in others, not through preaching or advice, but through embodied example. Children, especially, benefit from witnessing authentic adults. Instead of learning that love requires self-abandonment, they see that healthy relationships involve mutual respect and honest communication. You break generational patterns of people-pleasing that may have operated in your family for decades. Your mother who pleased your father, your grandmother who pleased your grandfather, generations of women and even men who smiled and nodded and disappeared. Your work culture changes when you stop automatically saying yes to unreasonable requests. Others notice that boundaries can be professional rather than personal, that self-respect doesn't require aggression, that taking care of yourself allows you to better serve others. Even casual interactions are transformed. Stop encouraging others' irresponsibility by always accommodating their needs. This forces them to develop their own capabilities rather than relying on your infinite flexibility. Jung understood that society transforms one individual at a time. Each person who chooses authenticity over approval creates space for others to make the same choice. Your recovery from people-pleasing becomes a gift to the collective unconscious. But Jung also warned that this responsibility can become another form of people-pleasing if you're not careful. The goal isn't to transform others, it's to maintain your authenticity regardless of others' responses. The ripple effect happens naturally when you live from your integrated self. The deepest wave is what I would call granting permission. Your authenticity gives others unconscious permission to be real too. In a world full of masks and performances, your willingness to be genuine becomes revolutionary. Models that it is possible to care for others without abandoning oneself, to be kind without being weak, to have boundaries without being cruel. This is Jung's vision of individuated humanity, to be aware in authentic relationships. Conscious choice. Jung understood that recovering from people-pleasing isn't a one-time event, but a continuous practice of conscious choice. Every day presents opportunities to revert to old patterns or maintain your authenticity.
What I would call the daily practice of authenticity becomes your path forward. This practice involves micro choices that seem small but create massive transformations over time. Pausing before automatically saying yes. Monitoring your body's response to requests. Expressing preferences instead of always saying whatever you prefer. These small acts of self-respect add up to profound changes. Jung wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you will do." Your authenticity becomes real through consistent actions, not one-off decisions. Every time you choose honesty over people-pleasing, you strengthen your capacity for authentic relationships. The practice also involves what I would call compassionate firmness, maintaining boundaries with love rather than aggression. You learn to say no in ways that honor both your needs and the dignity of others. This doesn't mean becoming harsh or indifferent. It means becoming clear and honest. Jung believed this awareness represents evolution, the development of human beings who can love without losing themselves, care without exhausting themselves, connect without abandoning themselves. It's not selfishness, it's integration. It's finally becoming the person you've always had the potential to be. The ongoing challenge is maintaining this awareness during stressful times, when old patterns seem safer, when someone is upset with your boundaries, when conflict seems too difficult, when approval seems easier than authenticity. These are the moments that test your commitment to individuation. But Jung observed that whenever you choose authenticity over approval, you become stronger and more integrated. The path that once seemed terrifying becomes familiar. Answers that once seemed impossible become natural. You develop what Jung called a psychological backbone, an internal structure that supports authentic relationships. This doesn't mean becoming inflexible or incapable of compromise. It means compromising by choice rather than compulsion, from strength rather than fear, from wholeness rather than wound. You can negotiate and collaborate while maintaining your core self. Jung's vision for the individuated person includes the capacity for what he called creative adaptation, responding authentically to life's demands without losing touch with your core self. This is a mastery of awareness, fluid yet grounded, responsive yet bounded, caring yet self-protective. Daily practice becomes less tiring as it becomes more integrated, but it never becomes unconscious. Awareness requires continuous attention, but this attention becomes joy rather than burden. After this video, you'll stop people-pleasing. Not because you've learned techniques or strategies, you'll stop because you finally understand what Jung knew. People-pleasing isn't kindness. It's self-betrayal disguised as virtue. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege has always been available to you, but you've mistaken it for the illusion of security, the promise of love, the hope of acceptance."
Now you understand that true love, the kind worth having, can only come from your true self. The people you lose when you stop pleasing didn't love you anyway. They were using the performance version you created to avoid rejection. When that performance ends, space opens up for people to appreciate the real you. Boundaries, needs, authentic reactions, and all. This is not easy work. Jung understood that awareness comes at a price. You'll face resistance, feelings of guilt, the discomfort of learning to be yourself in a world that preferred your mask. But the alternative, continuing to betray yourself for the comfort of others, is no longer acceptable. You weren't born to manage other people's emotions. You weren't designed to carry responsibilities that aren't yours. You weren't created to be appreciated at the expense of being real. Jung saw through this illusion and offered a different path, the path of becoming whole. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you honor the deepest part of yourself. Every boundary you set with love creates space for genuine connection. Every no you utter from your truth opens the door to meaningful yeses. This is your journey of individuation, not perfect, not complete, but conscious. You are learning to love others without losing yourself, to care without exhausting yourself, to be kind without being weak. Your days of people-pleasing are over. Your authentic life begins now, right here, in this moment, where you finally choose yourself, not against others, but for yourself. And in doing so, you become capable of loving others in ways you never imagined possible when you were too busy disappearing. Leave a like to mark this moment. Write "I choose myself" in the comments. And subscribe to the channel because the journey to authenticity
has just begun. Jung dismantled so many mechanisms that keep you caged that we'll need more videos, many more. I hope you find the courage to disappoint people and discover who you really are. See you in the next video. Choose yourself, always.